This is Ready, Set Reiki, a podcast about Reiki and all energy work, from the curious beginner to the seasoned master teacher, welcoming all systems, all lineages, and all levels. Reiki is a journey and not a destination. And on this Ready, Set Reiki journey, I refer to myself as a guide. So I'm Tracy Seawright, and this is Ready, Set Reiki. Hello, beautiful listeners. Welcome. This is Ready, Set Reiki. And what a glorious day it is, because my amazing guest has, in my opinion, one of the best names ever. Of course, her name is Tracy in score. So let me introduce her. I mean, us Tracys need to stay together, and especially it's spelled, in my opinion, the right way, right? Now, she has practiced land use and environmental law in California for the past 16 years, in addition to still practicing law part-time at one of the fastest growing large law firms in the United States. She is also a holistic energy practitioner specializing in burnout prevention to recover for fellow lawyers, as well as providing support for law students and recent law school graduates. Having personally experienced burnout firsthand and many unsuccessful attempts to fix it, Tracy found that emotional freedom technique, or EFT, more commonly known as tapping, was the missing link in her own recovery. By working with the body's meridian system, EFT helps to restore the mind-body connection and has been clinically proven to be effective in treating issues such as anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, she is a certified EFT practitioner. She has a unique approach to a burnout prevention and recovery. It emphasizes on the nervous system, regulation, and the power of the subconscious mind, therefore empowering her clients to address the true root cause of burnout. As one of the very few certified EFT tapping practitioners who also practices law, she is also able to relate to her clients with empathy and a keen understanding of real life issues they face. Welcome, Tracy, to Ready, Set Reiki.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me.
Wonderful. So let's begin our journey together. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I was born in the early 1980s in Southern California, so I'm an solidly elderly, elder millennial, and I grew up as an only child in a very seemingly normal family. My dad had a landscaping business, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom until my parents divorced when I was 13. But what a lot of people didn't realize was that we were part of a high control religious group, really a doomsday cult until I was about 10 years old. And this church dictated a lot of aspects of our everyday life. One aspect of that was they really promoted physical discipline of kids. At one point, even providing wooden paddles at the church services to like take your kid in the back and paddle them if they were misbehaving. Now, for my dad, because of his own unresolved trauma, which I now understand, he was a rageaholic. So this was not a good combination, because it really became a channel for his anger, and it was actually sanctioned and encouraged by the church. So, now back then, a lot of people spanked their kids. So I didn't know that this degree wasn't normal until much later in life.
Right.
But in general, home was a stressful place to be because I never knew what mood my dad would be in. There was this constant tension and just walking on eggshells. And I mention this because of the nervous system work that I do with my clients every day. I can see now how this really set the stage for me being in just this chronic state of fight or flight before I even knew what that was. And so school and academics really became my safe place and a way to have control over my life. Because when I was excelling and getting awards and getting good grades, it meant no one was mad at me. I could buy some approval, right, for a short time. And so getting that reinforcement with praise and rewards, my entire sense of self-worth and value really became tied to performing and achieving. Like I got my first after-school job when I was 14. I tested out of high school when I was 15 and started college early while working full-time. And So after college, law school just seemed like the natural next step and like the next hard thing I could do to continue to prove my worth and value. So I graduated in the top 20% of my law school class. I had this great six-figure job offer right out of school, and yet I knew deep down that something didn't feel right. But because I had trained my whole life to stuff down my emotions, disassociate, and just keep pressing on, that's what I did. And I was the stereotypical type A perfectionist, overachiever, very in my masculine energy, until about 5 years into practice when it finally all caught up with me and I experienced a major burnout and a really dark night of the soul, spiritual tipping point.
Mm.
And at the time, I blamed the job, but what I know now is it was the energy that I brought, not just into my career, but everything I did. So fast forward 11 years, as you said, I do still practice part-time, but now the great joy of my life is sharing this healing work with other lawyers, other high-stress professionals
Mm.
struggling with burnout because I lived it.
Yeah, yeah, burnout is for real. And as you were talking, it made me remember, my childhood. So I went to elementary school in the latter 70s, and there was still that fear that you're going to go to the principal's office, right, to get disciplined,
Yeah.
and that fear around that, like, oh, I'm going to get a spanking if I don't behave. And then you had the religious trauma as well. And I recall, in church that you had to be a certain way or do this, or you're going to go to hell, you're not going to go into heaven. So you had this fear of, oh, I better walk the line here, or, I'm not going to go to heaven and meet Jesus, right?
Right. Yeah.
So just all of this, like in a very young mind, like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, where all this development is happening, is all
Mhm.
around fear based, right? And even like, and it was that generation, like having a grandfather that just looked at you the wrong way. And it's like,
Yeah.
woo, you don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, and it was so normal for so many people
Hmm.
that we fall in that comparison trap. Like, I had really good parents.
Hmm.
Despite all of that, I had an overall good childhood,
Yeah.
very loving parents. Just imperfect people like all of us.
Yeah.
And we don't wanna compare and say, "Well, my trauma wasn't anything compared to this person, so I have
Sure.
no right to be upset." It's about how it affects you, you know?
Right, 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 right. But all of those are part of what makes you today, so that
Mhm.
you go out and you help other people, that you are
Right.
of service. So we are here talking it's holistic energy, about EFT. So when did EFT come into your life? Is it something that you found, or did it find you?
It found me. It tried to find me, and I was like, "No, go
You're
away."
running.
So, I only tried it for the first time about 3 years ago, even though I heard about it way before that. I admit I was very skeptical. It sounded too good to be true, and I had already tried so many different modalities in addition to traditional talk therapy and prescription medication for depression and anxiety. And although each thing I tried helped to some degree and definitely played a role in my healing, I was a little discouraged that I hadn't
Mm.
found the thing
Right.
to finally get me over that last hurdle of just still feeling really depleted, still being very dysregulated when it came to stress, feeling unable to manage my emotions, even though I was doing much better. So I forget now what I was even upset about at the time, but I was watching YouTube videos on my couch and I came across the tapping solution,
Mm.
which is a great resource. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but definitely check out tapping solution. And Nick Ortner, one of the founders, was doing a video where he was walking you through the tapping sequence to clear negative emotion around whatever was bothering you. So I did it. I followed along. And at one point he says, okay, check in with that emotion. Where is it? Has it gone higher or lower on this 0 to 10 scale? And I'm just tapping and I'm like, it's gone. Like,
Mm.
what the heck? Like, yes, I can still remember what it was, but I no longer feel that physical activation or that like emotional charge to it. It's like I can just calmly observe it and be neutral. And something really clicked for me, that what I had been missing all these years was the somatic piece. I had been
Mhm.
so in my head trying to rationalize and force up here these changes in my brain and completely neglecting the connection with my body. So
Right.
I continued tapping on my own, very quickly realized I need to share this with as many people as possible. And I had a unique ability to bring this to the legal profession, with that credibility of being an attorney who knows firsthand what it's like. So,
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. So in Reiki, there's a lot of misconceptions because it's energy work. And I say that, EFT is very similar to Reiki. It's the touch, right? It's
mhm,
moving energy. So as you're out doing this and working with others, especially in the legal field here, very serious, right? Facts, right? Statistics,
mhm.
things, right? You're, fighting for your clients and cases, and you have some of these challenging cases ahead. What are you finding the misconceptions that people are coming to you with regarding this?
So it's not so much a misconception, but I'd say that it's still just not very widely known about.
Mm,
It is slowly becoming more mainstream, but even though it's based in the principles of acupuncture, which have been around for thousands of years,
absolutely.
the specific tapping sequence was only introduced like in the early 1990s
Hmm.
by the creator, a man named Gary Craig. So it's still somewhat new. The cool thing is that Gary Craig, rather than trying to claim ownership of this technique to profit from it, he gifted it to the world, which means that this technique is available to everyone. No one owns it. And so, although there are definitely benefits to working with the practitioner, this is intended as a self healing technique that you can do anytime, anywhere, without needing to make an appointment or like rely on anyone else. And so, just like you, Tracy, I also consider myself a guide and
Hmm.
a teacher rather than a healer, because I'm teaching this technique to my clients so they can do it themselves.
Right.
I'm just guiding them to awaken the healer that exists within all of us. And so, another question I'll get a lot is whether, as a practitioner, I'm physically tapping on you as the
Mhm.
client. And the answer is no, you're
Right.
tapping on yourself as I guide you through each point, which means the sessions can be done online via Zoom from anywhere in the world. And
Mm.
you're completely in charge of your own experience, which is great for people who might not be comfortable with physical touch.
Right. I
Mhm.
know I found it. I stumbled on it in, gosh, it was like probably 2003. There was a gentleman that I think it was a little video he put up, and I was doing it then as part of it. And I keep coming back to it from time to time. But it's a wonderful modality, especially those like Reiki. You can do it on yourself. But if you're going to a practitioner and they're hovering, that may not feel comfortable for some. If they have
Mhm.
that post traumatic stress, or they've had some type of trauma where they're not comfortable in that situation of, laying down on a table or sitting down on a chair, that you're taking control over that, and saying affirmations. So it's just a wonderful, positive thing to bring to someone to learn. It's a wonderful skill. So you're out helping others, being of service, but what has been a challenge or struggle you have faced in your own healing journey?
There's so many, but probably being stubborn and getting in my own way,
Oh, yes.
refusing to try things out of fear, mostly fear of disappointment, and, not being willing to release control and surrender. I'd say that's one aspect, and then the other is overcoming my people pleasing tendencies that
Mm,
I relied on my whole life to feel safe. And then essentially having to deconstruct this life that I created from a place of misalignment. So, like, I was very hesitant to blow up this life that looked perfect on paper and
mhm,
offered so much security, not just career wise, but also in my relationships, which involved getting a divorce, a second divorce, and
mm,
ending a marriage that wasn't bad, but where there was just a lot missing.
right.
And realizing that it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. All that matters is how my life feels to me because I'm the one having to live it.
Mhm. Beautiful. And of course, you have the EFT to help you with those, right? For
Exactly.
people pleasing. So it can be anything that you're working on, correct? So say like, um, you need more courage. You can tap
Hmm.
for courage, right? You can tap
Yes.
for the people pleasing, stress. So you don't have to always use it when it's the stress. And even using it every day. With Reiki, we say try to do it every day, just for today, and use
Mhm.
these principles of it. So that way, when these big things come up, the big waves there, you're ready and you can bring that tool and skill into action.
Exactly.
So, when it is time for you to get an energetic tune up, what qualities do you look for in either an EFT practitioner or a holistic energy practitioner?
Oh, and I do. I trade sessions with a wonderful fellow practitioner every week, in addition to tapping on my own. Um, I would say the most important thing is to find someone who specializes in the area you're wanting to work on or who has a similar lived experience. Um, the most important thing, though, I think, is just feeling very comfortable with that person to be completely honest and to be able to share anything that might come up for you because you're going to be very surprised what emotions and memories start coming up as you're sending those signals of safety through your body. So sometimes the issue you show up to work on isn't what even ends up coming out in the session. But overall, yeah, just look for someone you feel really comfortable with. That might mean trying a couple different practitioners.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's listening to this right now and they're in the corporate world, or they're an attorney, or they're in medicine, whatever they're doing, and they feel the calling to do this? What advice would you give someone who wants to enter this spiritual work, enter, this tapping EFT?
Yeah. And I think the advice is the same whether you're looking to just do this for your own benefit or whether you want to help others as a practitioner. And that is to stay in a place of curiosity. If we think of the vibrational scale, I think curiosity usually isn't listed on there, but it is
Mm,
a great place to be because it's pretty neutral.
yeah.
It's kind of just in the middle and it allows us to be open to different possibilities. So instead of, don't look at yourself as someone who needs to be fixed or seek to banish or disown these undesirable parts of you. Instead, when we can stay in a place of non-judgment and just gently
Right.
go, huh, look at that. Like, I wonder what that's all about. I wonder where that came from. I wonder
Mhm.
what that's trying to show me. And, likewise, from a practitioner standpoint, to not to resist the urge to jump in and fix and want
Mm,
to achieve a certain result for your own
right.
ego. You want to allow the client to take ownership of their own experience. That was a challenge for me in the beginning because as a lawyer, I'm used to being in problem solving mode.
Right.
Saying, here's what you need to do, or here's the end goal. I had to
Mm,
become a better listener so that in turn I could teach my clients how to listen to themselves.
yeah. Yeah. It's also with a teacher too. My background's elementary education, to like not get in there, and as an empath too, right? You have
Yes.
all this, all this happening, all this going on.
And as an intuitive, when you're like, "Oh, I know exactly what
Exactly.
is going on," but
Isn't it? We got
you
it
gotta
all going on.
you gotta let them bring that information up even though you're already kept picking up on it.
So, what books do you recommend?
So if you wanna learn more about EFT and have some guidebooks for doing EFT on your own, I really like Margaret Lynch Rainier. So she has 2 really popular books. One is called Unblocked and one is Tapping into Wealth. Great, great, EFT teacher. And then just for general personal development, I really like Frances Scovel Shinn. I was introduced to her work last year, and also the teachings of Abraham Hicks and Neville Goddard, which kind of built on that, just in
Yes.
terms of the power of our minds and our ability to create our own reality.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, what other services or modalities do you offer? Do you offer sessions, one on one? Are you doing classes, trainings?
I mostly do one-on-one sessions. Um, tapping in a group setting can also be very effective. It's just a
Mm,
very different experience because you're all holding space for each other.
yeah.
Usually, I'll do group events focused on a particular theme. One of them was like overcoming financial blocks, for example, because we all have
Mm-hmm.
areas in that, and that we can work on there. So I do occasionally offer group events online. You can subscribe to be on my mailing list through my website to find out about those. But my main modality is EFT.
Yeah.
I'm also certified in neuro linguistic programming, NLP.
Oh,
So I will sometimes infuse elements of NLP into my sessions, but I find EFT to be just so dang effective that probably 80 to 90% of the one-on-one sessions we're actively tapping.
sure, sure. That's your
Yeah.
calling.
Yeah.
So, where can somebody find you? Online, in person? What if they're listening to this and they're like, yes, she is it. She is my guide.
So my website is tapoutburnout.com. That's all one word. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Tracy Inscore and Tap Out Burnout on Instagram.
Beautiful. Well,
Mhm.
that ends the first part of our journey, and I'm going to guide you right on to the next part. These are questions from social media. So here we go.
Awesome.
Number one, we talking about EFT tapping and how does it work? Can you kind of help us? Give us an example of like maybe a tiny little session?
Sure. So EFT or tapping, as the name implies, involves light fingertip tapping on certain meridian points on the head and upper torso in a specific sequence while we focus on an emotion or a memory or a problem. So it is based in traditional Chinese medicine and that core premise that everything is energy, that all negative emotion is caused by energy blockages within the body. So we're vibrational beings. Every emotion, every experience carries a certain vibration or frequency. We're like little sponges. And so our body is like this living, breathing record of everything we've ever experienced. And sometimes, just like a vinyl record gets scratched and won't play properly anymore, our emotional experiences can do the same thing within our body. And we find ourselves being triggered by things, feeling that emotional charge, having a physical reaction when we think about a past event. And so the meridian system is like an energetic highway running through the body. I live kind of near LA, so I'm just thinking of like LA traffic.
Right.
It's
Of course.
just
Yes, I've
sucks.
driven in LA.
And so tapping allows us to restore the proper flow of our life force energy, of our chi, through those meridians. So there's 12 main meridians. Each one corresponds to a specific part of the body. And when there's any sort of blockage, that's when physical ailments and illnesses and the emotional issues start to happen. The idea is there's always a root underlying emotional cause to anything that's showing up for you physically as well. Um, Acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, was way ahead of its time
Mhm.
in identifying the meridian system, which kind of represents the framework of the nervous system as we know it in modern Western medicine. So most of us are familiar with the meridians because of acupuncture, which, as you know, involves placing needles at certain points to get that stuck energy flowing properly again. So fortunately, with EFT, we've identified certain points on the head, the upper torso, that are especially useful for dealing with emotions, and found that with just applying light pressure or tapping on these points in a specific sequence, we can essentially get the same result as acupuncture, but without needles.
Mm, beautiful. And those that are just joining, what does EFT mean? What is that's the short version of it.
Mhm. Oh, yes, it stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques.
Beautiful. So
Mhm.
the way that I learned it years and years ago was just tapping and saying, I am financially free. And I would do different affirmations for each tapping.
Mhm.
Correct. I also do yoga, yin yoga, and it brings in traditional Chinese medicine as well. It can have an option with focusing on the meridians as well. So doing tapping, things like that, we bring that in as well with that. So very good.
Mhm.
Very good. Number two, what is the importance of the subconscious mind to the nervous system?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to nerd out this. I love this stuff. So we kind of have to understand the nervous system, which is, in a nutshell, our body's command center, our brain, spinal cord, neurons. They're sending messages all over the body that control literally every function. And so we have the autonomic nervous system that regulates like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, digestion. That has two parts. The sympathetic system controls our fight or flight response. Parasympathetic regulates our rest and digest functions. Ideally, we would be in that rest and digest state most of the time, unless there was a literal threat to our survival.
Mm.
Sadly, we have not evolved to know the difference between being chased by a tiger and getting a stressful email at work. So, what
Mm-hmm.
happens? We spend most of our time in fight or flight,
Right.
and that becomes our regular state of being. And what happens when we're in fight or flight is that the amygdala in our brain becomes overstimulated, and it causes the blood flow to leave our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that does creative problem solving, which is unfortunate because times of stress are when we most need
Mm-hmm.
that part of our brain, but it just checks out and goes offline. And then we revert to our more primal responses. Our body produces adrenaline and cortisol as part of our survival instinct. But in the case of burnout, this can actually become a chronic state where we're constantly pumping out these chemicals because our body literally thinks it's under attack.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have the subconscious mind, which is like a huge memory bank, contains all the stored information of everything you've ever experienced. And it's always working in the background. You're not necessarily aware of it. It's like a software or app that's just running in the background. And around 90% of our brain activity is subconscious
Mm-hmm.
rather than conscious.
Right.
It's not only recording everything that happens to you, but it's impacting your current emotions and behavior and choices. So, in terms of the communications between our brain and our body, about 80% is going from our body to our brain. Only about 20% goes from our brain to our body. But what do most of us do? We put a tremendous amount of effort in trying to address the 20%, what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in our brain.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is, yes, we can't ignore that component. It's important. But if instead we focus on the body where that 80% lives, you will see a change in the fraction of the time and with far less effort. So the nervous system and the subconscious mind work together because our subconscious is constantly taking direction from the nervous system, from the body, as far as what feels safe. The number one goal of our subconscious mind is to keep us safe. So it will let us know, it will let our nervous system know when something is perceived as a threat so that
Mm-hmm.
we can have the correct response. But as we said, some of us walk around in that constant state of stress when there's
Sure.
no physical danger,
Mm-hmm.
which means that even good things can become scary because they're simply unfamiliar.
Right.
Things like getting a raise, being in a healthy relationship,
Mm-hmm.
working less, feeling relaxed, it can actually feel uncomfortable
Oh, yeah.
because your subconscious says, whoa, this is new. This is different. What is this?
Right, right. I was watching someone's reel and she put in there that her nervous system doesn't know the difference that she's being chased by a bear when she's actually like watching her daughter in a competition. It was that same level of stress. And after my sister passed, I felt like I was in this constant state of stress because we had
Mhm.
another family member pass and then my dad got sick. Like we had like four deaths in like a this chunk of time. And
Yeah.
I remember one time, I think I dropped my phone. It accidentally called my daughter. And then you know how you're like, oh no, no, she's working. And then you push it to stop and then it rings again. And so it had been
Mhm.
like two or three times. And she calls me back and she said, who died? And that's makes you realize, oh my goodness, we've all been living in this state of this high anxiety that's the
Yeah.
first thing, not that I'm calling to say hello and how your day is,
Mhm.
it automatically went to who died. And I felt like, oh my goodness, we need to all come down a little bit here. But we weren't realizing that's how we were surviving because we had one bad thing. This was all through COVID as well. So we had
Mhm.
COVID thrown on there and all these deaths and like, now what kind of thing attitude. Yeah. But, things like EFT, Reiki, these are tools that you can use. So, when I'm out and I'm feeling overwhelmed and stressed, I'm going to go sit in my car. I'm going to tap, right? I'm going to
Mhm.
go into the bathroom, do a little tapping, do a little Reiki to kind of help you ride that wave to get calm.
Yeah, because, knowing something and feeling it are two
Mhm.
very different things.
Yeah.
And as someone who's in my head a lot and very like intellectual, um, we can consciously get over something that was
Mhm.
upsetting to us, whether that's grief or trauma or betrayal or shame. But if our body never got the message that it's safe, then that emotional charge is going to be reactivated. Like you said, every time your phone rings, every time
Mhm.
that person's name shows up on your phone screen, you're
Mhm.
like that clench in your chest,
Mhm.
like that visceral physical reaction.
Right, right. Our third question, which is about your specialty, burnout. What are the three-step processes for overcoming burnout? I know many people are dealing with this, as a attorney, I'm a teacher, we're in the industry here of service. This is something when we get our cup completely emptied out, right?
Mhm.
So what are some techniques here?
Yeah, so the first is to take the edge off and get out of crisis mode because
Mhm.
it's very difficult, if not impossible, to problem solve and see big picture patterns
Mhm.
to do deeper work when we're in survival mode or when we're in a state of fight or flight.
Mhm.
So this might take place at the beginning of each session where we're bringing the client down to just a more manageable level so that they can think and be more contemplative. Sometimes we might have entire sessions
Mhm.
dedicated to bringing that anxiety and stress level down just so you can think clearly. And then step two is to recognize the deeper root cause issues that led to the external issue, such as burnout in the first place. So, the single most important thing I've learned about career burnout is that it is never really about the job
Mm.
or the
Yeah.
career. It is a symptom of much deeper issues that were probably going on within you well before you stepped foot in that job. So that
Mhm.
means that changing jobs or even changing industries might give some temporary relief, but that pattern of burnout will find a way to keep showing up in other areas of your life or in a new job until you truly get to those root causes. So example of some of those that we might work on in step 2 would be maybe you're living outside of your true purpose or out of alignment with your core values and priorities, because it can be exhausting to be out of alignment with your true purpose and your authentic self. It takes a lot of energy to fake it and
Mhm.
pretend to be someone you're not. Um, that step 2 is well where we'll work on the childhood family dynamics, past trauma, that nervous system dysregulation that comes up specific to a memory or a past event, subconscious blocks, fears, limiting beliefs, especially around money,
Mhm.
or a belief that we have to struggle and sacrifice in order to be worthy, that it's not allowed to be easy.
Mhm.
And just like societal programming in general, this hustle culture, boss babe nonsense that we should all be, stressed and
Mhm.
over caffeinated. So then we get to step 3, which is in once these deeper issues have been addressed, we've cleared out a lot or most of the unwanted or undesired energy and emotions, is when we can start creating what we do want. And so that might mean getting more comfortable with the idea of making a career change,
Mhm.
releasing any fears or limiting beliefs around money, self-worth, maybe setting boundaries, and of course, more fun things like manifestation and
Mhm.
visualization
Mhm.
while we're tapping to kind of anchor in that feeling of safety in the body relative to those desires that can
Mhm.
actually feel unsafe at first because they're unfamiliar. So
Mhm.
step 3 is really all about getting more comfortable with feeling really good as your new normal, as your new set point.
Right, right. I like that you have steps to it, right? Instead of like all in one. And that gives that person, okay, this is a process. This is a journey,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to really focus on the destination right now. We're focusing on the journey. We'll take it step by step at their comfort level. So that's really
Yeah.
wonderful. Wonderful. Well, that was our last question. And as we've been talking, is there something you may have forgotten? Is there something that you want to share with the listeners? The floor is yours.
Oh, sure. So I offer some free resources on my website. I have a 30-minute burnout consultation. I would love to chat with you and see if we're a good fit to work together. And you can just share whatever issues you might be experiencing. So you can book that through my website. And I also have a free e-workbook. And the e-workbook is really based on step 3 of this process. You might be thinking, well, I can't go out of order. But actually, I find that some clients, it will give them that motivation to see, okay, this kind of blueprint of their life and where they've been and where they want to go. And so that addresses your life purpose, your mission, your values, and your priorities to help you even just identify what those are. I was in my late 30s before I realized I had never really sat down with those things for myself. So this is just a guide to help you do that. So that's available for free as well. And I think, Tracy, I shared with you a link for your listeners to have a
Mhm.
special discounted rate for a one-on-one session with me as well.
Beautiful. And what was the website again for our listeners?
That's tapoutburnout.com.
Love the name. I love it.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Tracy, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come along this journey with me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you.
Wonderful. And it's always wonderful to meet again another Tracy to connect.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, my wonderful listeners. I'm Tracy Seawright. If you are interested in your question being featured on the podcast, reach out www.readysetreiki.com. Here we go. And that's Ready Set Reiki.